was discussion about coming out of the TIMSS report, which is a report that comes out through the world, and they take scores from, it's a study, and they do reports from
Third international math and
sciences, and they say, like, let's compare the United States to the rest of the world. And they started looking at it, and they said American students do very well, K6, actually K7 in math, and then somewhere around algebra, our scores dip into the 30s and maybe even lower than that when it compared to other world countries. With that, so they started saying, what are we doing that they're not doing, and what are they doing that we're not doing? And what they basically said is they spend a lot of time manipulating the math, working with the math, doing the math inside the math, and they go slow so they can go fast later. Okay, and we were kind of doing the opposite. We were teaching kids algorithms in kindergarten. We were making sure they had the multiplication facts in place early on, and then we would do really well with the algorithms until we got to algebra. When we got to algebra, we would still do okay, but when we got to the proofs, they would say, guess what? We have no clue what we're doing. How did you get to the answer? And they said, I don't know. And that's where they started to switch around. So we went to investigations, which said spend more time manipulating the math. Talk about the math, write the math, draw the math, do a lot of things with the math. And you know what? Our math scores stayed very similar, close to the top in the state with that. So there's a lot of controversy around it. We stuck with it. Common Core Standards came. And our resource, looking at the new Common Core Standards, and Jeffco and the state, we adopted those standards, did not align very closely. When things were taught, how they were taught, didn't align very closely, and so the district said, is there a resource out there that aligns with the new Common Core Standards? We looked around. Math Expressions is the #1 resource in the United States. It aligns almost perfectly with Common Core Standards, state standards, so that's kind of how we got to a new resource purchased by the district, $5 million, support for our teachers, embedded in everything we do, but that's where we're at today.
And as you guys know, our math scores are, all our scores are high, but our math scores are particularly high. And through this accountability committee, this is where the accelerated math program started. We didn't have that until parents started looking at data with us. And so, as Gene said, we looked at investigations to try and develop more of a conceptual base. You're going to hear these words a lot over the next few years. Teaching in a conceptual way, not just skill-based and memorization and algorithms and things like that. It's really getting the kids to understand the concepts and teaching it conceptually. So Gene mentioned the Common Core Standards, and maybe you heard, if you haven't, that the TCAPS tests that have been around for 12 years or so are no longer being used. It's called the CMAS test. Okay, it's the Colorado Measurement of Academic Standards, or academic successes or standards. Success. That is where the Common Core Standards are embedded now, and maybe you've heard the word PARC. And that's where we are looking at the new Colorado standards and saying, how do we teach them better to the kids? And now, what we want to talk about tonight with Math Expressions is, how does that fit the program? What does it look like? Because investigations, we did a presentation like this about 6, 7 years ago, and it didn't, people didn't understand it as well. There's a little bit of both in Math Expressions. Taking the good from the math investigations, taking the things that are going to align with the Common Core Standards. So with that, Gene and I are going to introduce some people here, and then we're going to ask you, we think we know what you want, but we're not very sure. So we want to ask you what your expectations are for tonight. Not to answer right now, but just what do you think you're going to walk away with tonight? Or what are some of the questions you'd like answered? We may be able to answer some tonight, may get back to you on that, but we will certainly take them down. So, Gene, let's introduce people before we start.
Okay. At the primary school, part of the work that we do is we develop our teachers. We continually coach our teachers, and we continually help them train and get better at what they're doing. I have a coach at the primary building. It's Kara Berg. So if you see Kara at the building, she spends her time working with them, and then we share a teacher who comes in through the math department, Kim Miller, and she's going to be helping us tonight talking. She focuses and she goes to schools and trains teachers saying, we've got a new resource, let's dig into the resource and let's plan using that new resource and really get in deep understanding that resource.
Yeah, and so to round out the team, then we also have an instructional coach here at the intermediate, Kristen Van Alsdahl, and Kristen has been for first year, Kristen and Karen both the first year here. We work as a K-6 team. So we meet together, and these coaches are wonderful, working with teachers, working with district people, working with children at times. So maybe, helping out with some interventions and some things like that. So please, if you do have questions, don't hesitate to call, and any of us are available here at the school to answer questions. Sometimes maybe you don't get a response right away from the teacher. And if not, don't hesitate to call us. We'll make sure we get going with that. So with that, we just want to, are you going to take, you want to write it out? Just,
Kristen, would you take notes? So we're going to start out just, if you have questions, we're going to do that. And as the presentation goes along, we have little notepads and stuff. Just give those to us throughout the presentation. We're going to try and manage the presentation that way. And again, if we don't answer the question tonight, we'll get it out to you. We'll say, a lot of people have this question. Here's some information. We'll get it out in bits or even individually if we need to.
right.
And do you mind? This is actually a parking lot, so I'm not going to take notes right now unless we need the space. But there's some sticky notes on the tables, and I'm glad, just raise your hand, I can bring you some more. And if you have any lingering questions that we don't get to, jot those down and we'll put them up here. Or maybe it's something that we just know we can't really get to right now, or we need to research a little bit. We'll put the sticky notes up here and make sure that we address those.
And we'll have some time for questions and answers, but we know how these accountability meetings go. We could be here till 10 o'clock. And we have, haven't we?
And we're not going to.
Yeah, where's Patrick?
Just
We're not going to do that.
Patrick turns the lights
just
off.
got scared.
Yeah.
8:15.
So who's our time?
I know, where's Patrick?
I'll do it, I'm a
Oh,
swipe.
great.
So we'll let you keep us on track. So just, if you have ideas about, what are you expecting tonight? What are some of the things your expectations are for tonight that you have coming into a meeting like this tonight? Because we just said it was math expressions, and I know you're all interested. Anything that you want to be uplifted, you really said, hey, I came to the meeting because I want to know this.
I'm interested in differentiation, how the differentiation is happening in one differentiating by levels and classes.
Okay.
How does that happen inside the class? Other things you'd hope to find out tonight, yeah?
We all learn different ways when we learn math, and they're coming home, and how do we teach them when we have been teaching them a certain way and they learn another way at school? So how do we integrate that and say, okay, there's more than one way of attacking this problem?
I think great background knowledge of parents with knowledge of kids and that, yeah. Yes?
I guess sort of to that same point, just like the literal ways, which I know you can't go in for all the different grade levels, but like my friends are in a different district and they had something similar to this that went a few days where like, I know that my son's teacher, Mrs. Mead, is teaching him multiple ways to solve certain problems and to sit down so that I can learn what those 4 or 5 ways are for double-digit addition, so that I can say, is this easier for you or is that easier, so that I can be a better help, because my husband and I are realizing we learned it different ways. He's learning it a different way, and apparently there's 3 or 4 ways that he's learning it, so integrating, to his point, all of them, but figuring out how I can be the best coach to him as well.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll touch on that, and, in some schools have that math nights where it's not a presentation, but it's just where
Right.
parents come in and work with the teachers.
So just to piggyback on that theme, we had the same experience, and this worked well for us, and I don't know if there's a resource you can make available, but we reached out to the math teacher and said, is there a way you can make a copy of the textbook that you're teaching from available to us? And that gave us the resource we needed to see how it's being taught to our student or our child, so that we can not try to, undermine the teachers,
Yeah, but do it.
but do it the same way. so it's
Absolutely,
helpful for our students.
absolutely.
So I don't know if that's something you guys can make available to us.
Yeah.
I guess that's a big thing, is resources. Where can we go to find resources on how to teach this? Because when you go to the second grade website lately, it gives you, the link does not connect. And there's nowhere else to find it. It just gives you the Google and you have to log in and it won't let you.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
Or like we get the one-page instructional things, but again, it doesn't address like the 3 or 4 different ways that it sounds like they're learning, so.
Good.
I think I'm a math lover and a math dork, but my world is in the middle school. I've been in the middle school for 15 years, and so I want to make sure that the program and things that are offered are preparing kids so that they are ready for the middle school. And are they still going in as advanced as they were previously? So if they were in the advanced class, what that looks like. If they're in the regular class, what does that look like?
Other things?
Yeah, we come from a different district too, and we had everyday math for so many years. And I guess the concept there was that spiraling learning, you know, always going back to it. So I would just want to know if that's something, a general idea here as well. And another thing was, while I went to conference a couple of weeks ago, I learned that there was a lot of writing involved in it. Like my son didn't know he had to explain everything in writing that he did. Is that something that comes with it too, that half of the answer?
So we'll try and get on some of those things. These are conversations that we've had, and we talked about investigations being more language-based. That's what you're seeing, and what the kids are seeing. And Gene and I have a lot of experience with kids that get it but can't explain it. Good. Anything else before we get started with this and try and answer some of those things?
Yeah, something that deals with quantity versus quality. There's a lot of homework coming home with my kids. Some of it seems repetitive, and just wondering if there's a way to trim down the quantity and focus more on quality.
Something I've heard from parents at other schools where they run into issues are the multiple methods that are going on at the same time. I know we touched on it a little bit already, but how many multiple methods are they going to be learning at a time? Because I've heard from different places where a lot of confusion comes in there.
Yeah.
Good question. I don't know if this would just be unrealistic for the teachers, because I know that the teachers are slammed with stuff that they have to do every week's time. But I know that for my 2 kiddos that are now in 7th grade, they have, I wouldn't say they have it daily provided, but weekly, the math lesson that was covered that week on the math homepage. Is that realistic expectation?
In paper or in video?
Online. They go on to the math webpage.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's going into another area. That's a whole other presentation, because with the iPads and the one-to-one initiatives that we have going here, that is possible. And so that's going off to another.
Got it.
Yeah, but
It just helps me.
yeah.
Under-
Yep, to have everything available, yeah. Okay, well, let's go and get